The second speaker for the day would be Mr. Kiran Natarajan, who would talk to us on a unique survivor of the 1937 flying boat Cygnus crash from Calcutta. Kiran has been pursuing philately since a very young age through the school stamp club and youth philatelics. First exhibited in 1986 on the environment, resumed philatelic activities in 2016, focusing on aircrafts India area. Also, he created the first five-frame aircrafts exhibit shown at the state and national levels, awarded Vermeil at INPEX 2019, and he also won the gold at AMSI PEX 25 for the one frame exhibit Farewell India 44, the final greeting aircrafts of India Command. So over to Mr. Kiran Natarajan.
Thank you, Varun.
It's a pleasure.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to people from all the time zones who've logged in for this AMSI Zoom meeting. I'll start my little chat. It's just about one cover. The whole aspect of it being remarkable and unique survivor, etc., has to be taken with a bit of subjectivity. I personally, at least, feel it's special. Presenting it for the consideration of all our experienced aerophilatelists. The topic is unique survivor of the 1937 Imperial Airways flying boat Cygnus crash. So I've tried to structure this little talk into each of these. I had to give an introduction to Imperial Airways and to the flying boats themselves, because there is a bit of context. And then to Cygnus, which somehow in the research for this talk, I found it to be one of the most interesting flying boats among the 29 or 30 that they actually created for that wonderful exercise of the Imperial Airways Empire expansion route. So, well, most of the audience here would know it, but as a refresher, the Imperial Airlines business itself was started more as a British commercial venture when there were also similar efforts being made by the Germans and the Italians, or the French, I think, Italians and the French. So it was supported by the government to an extent. I'm not sure exactly how much of direct involvement, but there was a lot of in principle and policy support. It was a venture that really started in around 1924, and towards 1939-40s, it started evolving, becoming BOAC and then BEA, and finally some parts of it being absorbed into the newly formed British Airways. Nifty little logo, which you would have seen in so many of those Imperial Airways covers, although on some of the covers you would have seen a purple and yellow kind of color scheme, but this is the original emblem, which was I'm not sure if it was codenamed or just named as Speedbird. Very futuristic, almost like a Nike logo, but already in 1930, so about 40-50 years before that. And a very fascinating history to the expansion of the routes by Imperial Airways. Apparently they had three pioneering efforts, all led by Sir Alan Cobham. The first one being the route surveys for the route up to Cape Town, the second one for Melbourne, and the third one all the way up to Delhi. And it was for the London Cape Town survey that Sir Alan was awarded the Royal Air Force Cross and after the Rochester Melbourne leg, I believe he was knighted. So this is a very interesting period where the routes themselves were being proven. And then the airline, as it launched, as is generally observed in this domain, it had its catastrophes. Accidents were quite frequent. Apparently, 7 fatal incidents in the first 6 years. We will see in the upcoming slides about some specific crashes related to the type of aircraft that the Cygnus was. There was a bit of logistical challenge that came through due to what they call as overflight rights in the Persian and Arabian, well, that zone, where they had to flip the routes, sometimes taking the Persian side and sometimes taking the Arabian side of the Persian Gulf when the planes flew, and it was not an all-up scheme all the way. So until 1937, apparently, it involved rail journeys as well. So people would fly from, say, London to Bâle, and then take a train from there to Genoa, and then again fly Alexandria, and then take another train Alexandria, Cairo. So this was a bit of a mixed, perhaps romantic, but very mixed traveling scheme. And this was the precedent to the exploration of the expanded capacity aircraft by Imperial Airways, which one of which was what was called the flying boat. So the flying boats were designed so that they could operate and take advantage of being able to go on land on water and take off on water as well. And the picture on the bottom right of this screen, it gives you a specific statistic. They could take off in about 20 seconds on water, and they also had been given a specific type of hull, shaped as well as coated with certain materials which could help in landing and taking off on water and rough seas. So in the fleet of flying boats that we are focusing on, so there were actually 4 categories of these. There was what was called the short S-23 Empire. This was the backbone fleet for the Empire routes. Then there was the G class, which is large, long range, and the S-30 for transatlantic routes. Now, this entire flying boat fleet originated from a company called the Short Brothers. I guess Ireland-based. I didn't go through too much of the history or the story of this company, but seemed very fascinating to take up later. So they pioneered this effort to revolutionize air travel for long distance routes over water. And the aim was to cover about 800 miles, 760 to be precise, as we will see in one of the upcoming slides where they talk of the capacity. This is in what they call as plain air, where there's the entire journey goes through in ideal circumstances. And it was what was called one of the earliest through services, starting at Southampton and then heading across the Mediterranean into the Empire cities of which were the targets. Most interesting, they were known for very comfortable interiors and luxury, and they were quite successful. The capacity was quite small in terms of passengers. They used to, I believe they would hold about 20 to 30 passengers at most, but they were very luxurious. And for the schematic you see on the top left gives you an idea of so many of the facilities that actually were unheard of at that time and age for a service of this type. I mean, a smoking room and a promenade saloon. Um, I mean, unheard of before. So to travel with this luxury and um, through service, so straightforward without any interruptions. So this was the flying boat. Apparently ideal and the exemplar of what air travel could be. And the main fleet, which was launched, the S-23 C class, it had about 29 or 30 aircraft, all of them named with the letter C. One needs to find out what was the motivation behind that. Started with Canopus, which was the code given the name code name GADHL. Um, and the picture you see on the top is actually Canopus, giving some more specific figures. 88 feet from nose to tail, tip to tip, and a wingspan of 114 feet. These were very large aircraft, and 40,000 pounds fully loaded, and the range of 760 miles in still air, which I would assume is ideal conditions. Now, the focus of our presentation today is the 10th aircraft, Cygnus ADUZ, which is in the list there. Is that the 10th or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9th aircraft in the list? This has its own history. I don't know whether I should mention that now or probably I'll mention that a little later. So many famous names. We already encountered Sir Alan's name before this, but you would also be surprised. You'll see so many famous names around just this one aircraft at that time. Okay, so unfortunately, this entire Empire fleet and those who would have attended an earlier talk by Ken Sanford, I think, a few months ago, he covered the entire series of Imperial Airways air crashes with an example from each of them. And this list is just the fatal crashes of the 1930s, most of which involved the flying boats. Quite a few people. So I think so. We saw that 32 people were casualties in the first 6 or 7 years, and here if you walk through the list, it's quite a lot more. And these are all the people who sacrificed their life for the challenge of taking on air travel. Somewhat reflecting much later Mr. Grisham's statement, which we heard in Barry's presentation. So it really didn't matter to a lot of them that they could lose their lives. So, but they were pilots and they were passengers on this new adventure. So the Cygnus itself, which we are talking about, is a crash that happened on the 5th of December, 1937. There is a mistake here. It did not crash on takeoff. I shall correct that later. I somehow heard this same observation in Ken's presentation as well. But in the present research and reading some of the newspaper reports of that time, the crash was actually during takeoff from Brindisi. So the craft had arrived and had an overnight halt. And the next morning, when it was around 9:05, when it was set to head out, that was when it bounced and crashed. We will see details of that in the next slide. So now we've covered Imperial Airways, we've covered the flying boat and boats, and now we come to the Cygnus itself. So what happened was that the flight had arrived into Brindisi on the evening of December the 4th. Um, and the next morning, when it was to take off, it was choppy weather, but the captain was apparently quite an experienced gentleman, and it is reported in more than one of the contemporary news, and I believe even in the Italian support staff reports, that this was pilot error at the end of the day, and the details are already there, where the flaps were inadvertently set to be fully down, causing the aircraft to bounce. And apparently, when it was taking off, it bounced, rebounded, bounced again, and then rose 20 or 30 feet and came down nose first, crashing into the sea. Unfortunately, for those who have listened to this last description of what happened, especially those in India, you would remember that it is not even some months that the Air India crash at Ahmedabad was pretty much the same thing. Flaps were involved. There was a attempt for a takeoff, not exactly a bounce into water, but an attempt to rise and drop in altitude, and then it's pretty much the same thing. And it was so shocking to me to see that the flaps were involved. So uh, this is in 1937, and we had something similar just now, which is almost 100 years, 90 years later, similar incident. So anyway, the aircraft crashed. There were about I think close to 20 plus passengers. The reports say that seven passengers had been removed from the aircraft previously in Alexandria, and then the ground staff really helped really helped in the rescue, and the crew on the aircraft were also praised a lot in the news. We see here that the second officer, Mr. Mountain, dived 3 times to open the top hatch of the aircraft compartment, and despite this, there were, I think, two casualties. Two people lost their lives, but uh, very interestingly, from a philatelic and postal mail control point of view, uh, the aircraft was carrying almost 100 bags, close to 120,000 pieces of mail. It is reported that all of them were salvaged. So that's the news item there, which says all mails, 100 bags and 120 letters salvaged. Now, if you follow air crash covers and you're collecting them, we don't see so many of them in availability. Now one has to wonder if so many survived. Were they all not found worthy of storing by the aerophilatelists of the day, or so? Now, in terms of famous names, we come back to that. Just an interesting set of factoids. Apparently, on this flight, there was there was the son of Edwin Lutyens traveling, and he's one of the people who was interviewed for reports of exactly how the crash went through. He was apparently returning back from Jaipur, having designed some palace. And then we also see in the news report that S.P. Dutt, a well-known pilot and winner of the Viceroy's Trophy for the Round India flying race, apparently he was also on this flight. So we had so many famous names associated with this Cygnus aircraft. And now I have to mention also that the maiden flight of Cygnus apparently was conducted by one Mr. Alcock, who I think is related to the gentleman Alcock and Brown, as we know the names. I shall just divert your attention to this picture now. So this is a picture of GADUX Cassiopeia, which is here in the back, and right in the front is our focus aircraft Cygnus, which is GADUZ. And apparently, this is a picture taken at the flying boat servicing and maintenance base at Hythe on Southampton Water. Now, this is from some sort of airline specialist, enthusiast, special interest group. And the gentleman there mentions that just across from this maintenance base was another site in which T.E. Lawrence, who we know as Lawrence of Arabia, he was seconded in the 30s from the Marine branch of the RAF to the BPBC, and it was just across this site. So many names associated with this particular Cygnus aircraft and its whereabouts. So I think here he mentions that somewhere here he mentions that it was yeah. So the maiden flight of the Cygnus from Southampton to Alexandria was captained by E.S. Alcock, who's the brother of Alcock and Brown fame. Yeah, and then so there's a history of these famous names being associated with this aircraft. So this is all about the crash that happened and the mails that were found. Now, having set up all of this background information, I hope now to dive straight into some philatelic details. Now, the objective of the direction of this was westbound, of course, to England, and it was carrying mails from New Zealand, Australia, most of the stations westward, perhaps loading it at each appropriate landing and takeoff point. We have already seen that there were about 100 bags and 100,000 pieces of mail. All have been reported as recovered, and what some of the news reports mention is that pretty much a large part of them spent over a week in the water, because the plane it stayed afloat only for about 42 minutes, by which time except two people, the rest could be rescued, and around 45 minutes the plane completely went down into the water, and that was the end of the Cygnus. So apparently after that they had to take help from the local authorities to slowly recover whatever was possible. They found a week later all these bags, good amount of them soaked, but no fire damage or no tearing damage, I guess. So the bags were safely recovered, flown to London by a relief plane. I would assume that would have been an Italian relief plane, and then handled at London GPO. Ken has mentioned that there are a variety of caches. I think he mentioned about 40 odd. So these would be hand stamps, labels, explanation letters by each of the authorities where the delivery took the mails to. There's a gentleman by name John Thiessen who runs crashmail.dk, who has also documented some of these. Now, since our letter comes out from Calcutta and was marked to London, we focus on the British caches, which are clearly three types. There's a 4-line boxed damaged by seaplane cache, and an associated postage stamp lost in transit in violet. There's a 2-line boxed damaged by seawater, seen in black and violet, and a single-line boxed damaged by seawater with an associated bilingual cachet hand stamp related to the adhesives. So I'm not sure if this was a standing instruction by the postal authorities in England, or it was something put out only for this crash. But I have read that there was a newspaper notice that all stamps lost in such crashes would be kept in the post office for about 6 months, and people could actually go and collect them if they wanted to. So that's a piece of information I didn't know. Then yeah, so the again, wherever these the crash information is mentioned, we do see the small note that the cause of the accident was the result of the flaps being placed by the co-pilot in a fully down position rather than the takeoff position, and therefore a case of pilot error on part of both the captain and the second pilot. So again, I have to mention that this sounds so sinister and so dangerously similar to what happened in the Ahmedabad crash recently. We are yet to see the proper official reports of that. Moving on to so having covered general philatelic details around the mails carried in this crash, we move on to our little focus item. This is what I am calling a remarkable survivor, because it is an entire 6 pages of content, typewritten, which I came across about, I think, 2.5 years ago. It's with me, but it's not with me physically now. I just have the digital images. The physical is lost somewhere in the files. But thankfully, I have the images to share. Um, so this was found. I mean, when I got the envelope, I didn't know that it had so much content. I thought it was just an interesting envelope because it had a small monogram on the back, and I could faintly see the dispatch mark showing GOVER. So there was something to it. And then once I had it in my hand and saw the content, it was quite surprising. So what this is, it's a fairly detailed letter of 6 pages written by Doreen Natchbull. I guess that's the pronunciation. And she was the wife of Michael Natchbull, 5th Baron Brabham, who is also more famously known to the general public of India because of the Brabham Cricket Stadium. He was governor of Bombay, and he moved to become governor of Bengal in 1937. And this letter is written pretty much the time that they moved. I think the week they moved, or yeah, I think the week they moved or so. So the lady is quite excited about the move. The 6 page letter covers a lot of things about how the ceremonies happened when they were moving, the exit ceremonies and the welcome ceremonies in Calcutta, and a lot about life and times in Calcutta, etc. But very interestingly, for a letter that ended up in a crash like this, the last page actually mentions Imperial Airways flight timings and the days which she says not so convenient for exchanging mails and so on. So the points that I would make in terms of why I see this as an interesting and remarkable survivor is that, first of all, correspondences from such key governmental addresses don't really get into the public domain so much. They either get filed officially or are stored by the families. Then this being a crash cover which specifically mentions Imperial Airways. That's the other interesting point. And of course, being written by Brabham's wife. So Brabham himself, again, one of the more interesting governors, because he was a pioneer in reclaiming land in Bombay, reclaimed the land and gave it to the cricket authorities, and then they made it a stadium and named it after him. So what you see here is the obverse reverse of the cover, and the first page, dateline 29th November, from I would think that says Bengal Governor's Camp on the letterhead. Then the rest of the letter I've overlaid about 6 pages. A lot of it is personal and again talking about the ceremonies, etc., etc. But I have taken a clip from the last page, which I believe would be visible. So if you read it here, I'll try to read those 6-8 lines. Sure, this letter will run into many, many pages. One thing is very annoying. The Imperial Airways have changed the dates of the airmails, and now the airmail leaves here on Tuesday and again on Thursday night. Could you imagine anything more inconvenient, as it means that there are only 2 days at one time between them, and then 4 days the next time instead of the usual 3 days between each. So a bit of customer service feedback for Imperial Airways and the mail carrying services at that time, if somebody had gotten hold of this letter. So yeah, so this is, I think, the last detail I wanted to mention about this little cover. And with this, I have to end my talk. I hope it has been as interesting for all of you as it was for me to have discovered that little envelope. So over to you, Varun and Ankita.
Thank you so much, Kiran. That was absolutely fabulous. We thoroughly enjoyed it, and it makes it even more valuable that imagine you managed to get out so much information from just one cover. So that makes it even special. Thank you so much.